Hi, how are you?
I'm good. And how about you?
Good, thank you. Welcome to the show. This is Speaking English Today. Can you tell
Mhm.
me a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my full name is Kurt Hui Hong, but you can call me Kurt for the sake of convenience. And currently, I'm working from home as a software engineer. It's been quite long since last time I went out, but I've been enjoying myself. Yeah.
Nice. So, yeah, since we're all on lockdown with this whole coronavirus thing, what are you doing to keep yourself busy?
Normally, I would fill up my time with reading, with a lot of reading. I opened up some books that I had long not opened, yeah, and then I just went on like full mode of reading, you know. Then so it can be considered like an introvert mode. Then I also looked for other ways to, fill in my time with um, learning English. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really good time to be an introvert.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have been kind of going out for work purposes, but mostly I'm staying indoors and trying to figure out what I can do. And actually, this has kind of socialized me a bit with the world, starting this whole talk show and getting to know people and talking to people that are trying to learn English.
Oh.
So we talked a little bit before. What was your experience like learning English and like how long have you been learning English and how has that experience been for you?
Uh, Formally, it should be. Um, I think since I was studying in primary school, I think like in your place it's called primary school. Over here, it's still primary school. Yeah, since the time I was in primary school, but then it wasn't taught, in a way that everybody was interested in the class. As a child, I was so distracted by something else, and also I was having fun with other friends, and the whole environment was like it isn't a big deal to learn English. Hmm.
I see.
And
So is
then
it, yeah?
and then normally we spoke in our respective native tongue.
Okay, so are you pretty much learning English on your own now, in a completely different way from how you learned in school?
Sure. Currently I'm more serious about it. Initially, I was trying to dissect the language in terms of several grammatical structures and rules and a lot of things like that. But then I think it has backfired. And then, in a way, I was too bored to a point I really needed to take some time to chill out and then have some other forms of entertainment.
Uh,
And now I'm kind of struggling with like what strategies I want to use to learn it in a fun way. And also, one way is that um, what I'm doing right now. I'm talking to you. Yeah.
nice. Are you talking to people from other countries as well, or just native speakers?
Uh, my aim is to talk to native English, just to improve English in a native way. uh, in the end, I still talk to some other people in other places. Hmm. So regardless of where they are from, I still talk to them, and some of them want to learn Chinese from me. So I'm open to that.
Nice. There you go. So, when you were studying English before, what do you mean by learning grammar kind of held you back?
Um, it's just like without I learned without much examples. I didn't learn by examples. Learn although I went through the syllabus, there are a lot of free resources out there like BBC Learning English and all that stuff. And then I look it up. Then I was trying to see if I could really improve through that kind of method or not. And then I found it quite boring. Uh, without, I need some. It's like I don't find it interesting to look at text solely for the sake of learning. But then it's fun to connect to other people. And then if I can learn it naturally from listening to other people, how they use it, then it makes much more sense to me than just looking at the definition of the grammar. Okay, you gotta use used to or manage to in this way and that way. But then even though I kind of understood them, but then I wasn't really good at using them frequently.
Yes. And I was talking in another episode about how incredibly important it is that you stay motivated. You know, learning a language is a huge journey. So you have to enjoy that journey. And the more you enjoy it, it seems faster you actually learn.
Yeah, I completely agree to that. So I just started to think probably I stressed myself out a lot by looking at just text alone, and and I didn't realize that it might be fun to just talk to people like a child learning languages from their parents. They learn to mimic them instead of remembering rules and then trying to conceptualize the language. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's not really the way we naturally learn languages. Like for me, if I wanted to really improve my Spanish, like if I wanted to become absolutely fluent in Spanish in a short amount of time,
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to books and grammar and, you know, just
Yeah.
stress myself out with trying to understand a bunch of texts on a page. My strategy would be, and I could do this in my area, my strategy would be to go and try to spend time with a Spanish family, preferably one that no one spoke English. So
Oh.
yeah, I mean, my experience with learning a language, if you're fully immersed and you're
Mm-hmm.
speaking to people that can't communicate with you otherwise, they can't speak in your language, you learn it so much faster because it's almost like the way that we learned our first language. We,
Mm-hmm.
people kind of taught us naturally. So if I went and stayed with a Spanish family for a while and
Yeah.
we did everything together, like we cooked in the kitchen together, I would quickly learn all of the words in Spanish for cooking and um and it would just
Yeah.
build from there. And it's
Yeah.
it's since it's the natural way that we learn,
Yeah.
that is so much faster.
Yeah. It sounds really fascinating by just listening to you talking about how you learned it so naturally from a Spanish family by just engaging in daily life with them. And
Yeah.
then I wish to do so too, but I'm not that lucky to have like native English friends around me that I can easily contact.
Yeah, I've never actually done that before. That was only an example of what I would do if like it was
Mhm.
the ideal situation. Obviously, not everyone can experience the ideal situation. But that is how I learned Indonesian. One really fast way that I learned Indonesian was
Yeah.
when I was a beginner. I would talk with people, mostly security guards, because they had a lot of time on their hands to like
Okay.
talk to a foreigner, you know? And
Uh,
it was very interesting for them. And they had a very basic understanding of English. So
yeah.
we were somehow able to communicate, like we could talk about politics,
Oh.
just having a basic understanding of each other's language and Google Translate.
Do
Just,
they use that to communicate with you? Like they need to check. Hold on a second, I need to check that out, and then scroll up and scroll down, and after
well,
that they
I was.
say that what. Oh, you were
Yeah,
doing that.
I was using Google Translate and they were using their group of people. Like I was talking to one person, but he kept like turning and he's like, "What is this in English?" You know? And it was all like a community thing where they're all like trying
Oh,
to
yeah.
come up with the words together. And
Hmm.
I learned Indonesian faster in that experience than in any other experience.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Otherwise, I would continue to do my own rigid style of learning English. It
Yes.
doesn't work out really well. It takes so much effort. And then I was so kind of perfectionistic about how how I should go. Okay, how I should go about this.
And it's
So,
interesting because experts in language learning say that if you're stressed, your brain actually blocks you from learning another language. And it's very specific for learning a language. If you're stressed, you will very quickly forget what you learned. But on the other hand, if you're very motivated and you're experiencing a really great time, your brain
mhm.
will actually open up and expand to learning more.
Okay. So it sounds like it sounds like being stressed isn't a good way to learn. So meaning that if we are at the same time paying attention to too many details and then trying to structure the sentence in our spoken words, that's going to mess up a lot. Yeah. I
If that
can relate to
stresses,
that.
yeah, definitely. If that stresses you out, having to do that, then it will slow down your learning.
Hmm. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah. That is one strategy for improving your grammar. But one thing
Yeah.
I've noticed is with grammar, a lot of times it does hold people back
Yeah.
because people will focus so much on grammar and be so afraid of making a mistake when they speak that they never practice fluency. It's like they're practicing grammar the whole entire time. And it's
Oh.
it's okay to practice grammar. You know, it's good
Hmm.
to actually spend time to try to think of grammar rules and speak and go back and correct yourself when you know you made a mistake. But that can't be confused with fluency, which is a completely different skill.
Oh.
Fluency is a skill where you're able to just speak without stopping, hesitating, going anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's the ability that if you don't know a vocabulary word, you're still able to go around it and communicate your idea without knowing that specific word. And it's your ability to just kind of forget about grammar rules because that will slow you down. You have to, during your fluency practice, which is completely separate, you have to
Mhm.
be okay with making mistakes with grammar and forgetting words. You just keep going because what you're
Oh, I
trying to
see.
achieve is fluency. the ability to kind of be fluid and,
Yeah.
you know, flow.
No, it's kind of awkward to me when I've been trying to think about grammar rules. Like just now, I was really thinking, I was really paying attention to the grammar rules when I was speaking. That's why it took me so long to figure out. Okay, this is the structure that I want to say, and yeah, I didn't know that practicing the grammar rules and also practicing the fluency can be kind of against each other, right? It's, so meaning that if I'm practicing grammar rules, I can't practice fluency at the same time, right?
Yes. I mean, you could, but you have to be pretty much at the advanced level to practice two skills at the same time.
Okay.
Like, you have to become so good at fluency and then so good at grammar that
Yeah.
then you try to practice them together in one go, you know?
Hmm. I see. Yeah, that's very informative and helpful to me.
Yeah.
All right, I see. So, but normally, how do we practice fluency though? Is it just go with the flow, and then we can't get straight to the message, we just need to circle around and then try to find some ways to reach the destination of where we want to.
Yeah, exactly. So if you feel that word coming up that you can't remember in English, then you just try to describe it or go in a different direction or try to avoid the words that you don't remember.
Hmm.
But when you're practicing fluency, what I suggest to my students is they have a set of questions. Like they could use IELTS speaking questions, for example.
Yeah.
And just for about 2 minutes, try to speak without hesitating, without stopping. You can record yourself as well, and just try to speak fluently for 2 minutes. Don't worry about mistakes. Don't worry about your vocabulary, your grammar. Just ignore all of that. Your whole goal is to not stop and to not hesitate. And then
Oh.
once you're comfortable with 2 minutes, try a bit more. You know, see if you can go to
Hmm.
3 minutes, then see if you can go to 4 minutes, then 5 minutes. Start with easy topics and try
Yeah.
harder and harder gradually so that your fluency improves over time.
Okay. So one step at a time. So at first, I can try 2 minutes of non-stop speaking about a certain topic, and then I can move on to 3 minutes if I was familiar with 2 minutes already. And then I might move on to 5 minutes, and so on and so forth. Right?
Yeah,
See.
absolutely. Yeah, so for speaking skills, you have fluency, grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary. It's good when you're beginning, try to practice these separately when you're speaking. And as you get more advanced, you can put them together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm jotting that down. I'm basically taking a lesson right here because I haven't heard from any teachers in the local telling me about how to practice each of those. They do not usually say anything about these. Although some of them did try to correct me and also other classmates, but in overall we really didn't care about that when we were studying in school.
Yeah. And especially now, it's really important to be able to assess yourself in English and be able to see where your goals are, what you want to achieve. And one really helpful resource with that is the IELTS speaking. There's a rubric where it shows like a chart, like a breakdown for IELTS speaking, what
Yeah.
would be considered different scores for
Hmm.
these different categories for fluency, pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary.
Yeah.
And you could actually print it out and circle where you think you are on this chart, and then look up to higher marks and see, well, what would I have to do to achieve a higher mark on this? And then make your goals, set your goals and focus on achieving them.
Mm, I see. That sounds really good.
Yeah.
I'm up for that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I just want
Yeah,
to try
idioms.
different strategies once it like I just want to change like the strategies to learn once in a while, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you want to keep it fresh, because if you're always doing the same thing and you're always learning and studying the same way, then it can get really boring. And once it gets boring and it feels like a chore, you're not learning as much and you're not as motivated to keep going.
Mm. But it's also hard to get motivated as especially when you don't know the feedback to all the things that you have just learned in the lesson. Then it feels like, okay, you got a goal, but then you are always moving the goal post to somewhere else, and then you don't know, okay, why did I start this in the first place, and then where am I now? So I kind of got demotivated in that way. And then when I looked back at a book that I used to not understand every single word in it, and then I opened it up, it surprised me so much that what I've been doing in the last 2 years has um, has helped me in understanding all of these by just context, by context clues. I can look at the front, look at the whole context, look at the whole sentence to understand the word.
That's great. And that's a really important way to practice reading. There's also reading fluency, which is your
Oh,
ability to keep reading and get the gist of what you're reading and not
mm-hmm.
stop at every single word that you don't understand and look it up. You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
probably don't even do that in your first language, stop at every single word.
yeah. I basically didn't care. I would just skip if there was a whole bunch that I had to skip. I would just skip that as a whole, and then I wouldn't care. And but then if it didn't provide me much fun because of a lack of understanding, then I wouldn't even engage in reading it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't spend time reading something that you don't understand like 90% of, because then it just gets too hard and it's just a struggle. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
even half of them, even if half of them is not understandable, I think I would give up. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. It becomes too hard. It's something that is way above your level. So if it's like that, you know that you need to come down and read easier material at that point. But
Yeah,
getting
it's
back to the point that you made before, it
yeah.
is really hard from the intermediate level up to see how you're progressing. And I think that in this level, this is what most people struggle with, is
Mhm.
I've been studying for months and I don't see any difference kind of idea.
Mhm.
And so one thing that I suggest to a lot of my students is that when they have their specific goals, record themselves. If it's
Mhm.
speaking, for example, record yourself speaking, and then several months after you've been practicing this skill, record yourself again talking about the same thing and compare, and
Oh,
you'll see that you've made so much progress. And my students actually hate doing this because they don't want to listen to how they sound 2 months
okay.
ago.
I got it.
'Cause-
I got it. It's embarrassing. It kind of triggers. I did that too, and then it kind of triggered me to feel embarrassed about how I sounded a few months ago or even a few years ago. Um, yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
the reason why.
But it's also showing you that you have made so much progress. Even though it might not feel like it, you can see that, if 2 months ago you felt embarrassed about how your English was then compared to now, you've made
Hmm.
huge progress since then,
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's that can be one indication. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you achieve a goal, try to reward yourself in some way. It can be, I think just in life, it can be so easy to just, you achieve goals and then you just keep setting the bar higher and higher and you never really
Yeah,
stop to
yeah.
say, hey, I've done a good job here.
Mm.
Take the time to stop and reward yourself in some way, congratulate yourself and do something that you feel like, yeah, I've really achieved this.
Okay, that's a good advice. Okay. So reward yourself after each milestone.
Yeah. And that's true for anything that you're learning.
Mm-hmm. Several days ago, I was struggling with this particular problem you just mentioned, which is feeling like not making it, not going anywhere. It leads to nowhere. I can't really access myself. So I got to a point where it's so frustrating. It felt like, oh, I learn and forget. I don't know whether I really forget something or I've already known. You know, it's so hard to do so. Mm, yeah.
Well, a lot of people experience this, and I would say try not to be too hard on yourself. I know
Mm-hmm.
that when you're learning a language, these thoughts are going to come up, but these thoughts are also going to hold you back. It's just like studying boring material. If you feed into those thoughts, those negative thoughts about how you're doing, it's going
Mm-hmm.
to slow down your progress. So, any way that you can turn it around, try to think positively and focus on your goals and see how much you really have achieved. If you could
Yeah.
just flip it and just rather than being pessimistic about your learning, try to be more optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
that in itself will be more motivating and more helpful for you. You'll actually learn faster with that kind of mindset.
Hmm. It's quite easy to say that, and then
Yes.
but then to practice is like there's like a there's like a loophole in between like, getting of, for example, okay, you feel like you're not making it, you're not doing it well, and then to get to that level where you feel optimistic about you're making progress, and then in the middle there's a gap, and then normally like for me, even I struggle with this myself, and then I try to work that out by asking myself some questions like, what do I really want to reach, and then like what do I really want to achieve, and then how should I look at it, and how should I look at it differently, instead of looking at it as a boring task, the routine that I have to repeat from day to day, and it feels like of course it should be a never ending journey to learn English, but it's just that we need some feedback to gain something, like a lesson. Right, okay, I did this, and this can be improved by this much, and what can I do to it, and all that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would say if you're feeling really frustrated and stressed out, it could possibly be to be due to burnout,
Yeah.
where you're trying to push yourself too hard in that moment when you're really exhausted. And learning a language is a very emotional journey. So if you're starting to feel like really frustrated, like you're not getting anywhere, this is any of those thoughts that you mentioned before,
Yeah.
that would probably be a good time to take a break. To
Yeah.
just maybe that would be a good time to get away from studying, go
Hmm.
for a walk, maybe watch a TV series in English, do something enjoyable.
Yeah. Sure. I got this question I wish to ask.
Yeah.
It's a very personal question. I wouldn't say it's so personal. I think it applies universally to anybody who's learning English as a second language, but they couldn't bring it out. They can't clarify this kind of problem. Okay. Like to me, uh, although I took some like online tests to assess myself, like recently I used an app to help the learning journey. I just wanted to try. I just wanted to try the user interface. It's full of graphics, and then it's nice because it's using flashcards, and then it's playing podcasts. Uh, then I listen to them and all that stuff. And then my question is, hold on a sec.
Yeah.
I kind of forget where I am. Hmm. Okay, I got. Okay, I need to retrace my steps.
Sure.
So I was talking about an app.
You said that you
Then,
had a personal question.
oh yeah, personal questions. Hmm. Okay, I remember. I remember it right now. Okay. Although I took the test, and then it found out that okay, let's say I was somewhere in between B2 and C1, and kind of jumping back and forth depending on what kind of online test they gave me. And then my question is that there are some parts of the language that I feel I mean, there are some parts of the language skills currently I have is, are weak. Like for example, the grammar. Let's say the grammar, and then but then currently I'm up here at this level. Do I need to go back to the basics? And then it's not really clear to me like how weak I am for some parts of the language skills. It's so hard to clarify that for myself. Then what I did was I um, tried to go back to some to the lessons of intermediate, and then just went through it. But a lot of them were already known. So, but then I couldn't really see like, am I really weak in this area? And then it got to a point where I think there are some fundamentals to my language skills that are not strengthened yet. And
Ah,
then it kind of worried me, and because I'm afraid if I try to learn new things without strengthening the basics that I might be weak, but I don't know I'm weak in, then it might get me into trouble.
I see what you're saying. Well, I've seen this before. I've seen people get to really high levels, like upper intermediate and advanced levels, but there are certain areas that they never really worked on or they never really practiced. And you're always able to go back and start at the basics in the beginning. Like
Yeah.
grammar was a good example because I know someone, he never really studied grammar through a book or anything. He got to a high level of English
Mm-hmm.
and he kind of could feel out grammar like a native speaker, but he didn't always know whether he was correct when he was speaking or not. And he did make a lot of very basic mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, at that point, what we did was we used a book called Grammar in Use. It's a really good book.
Okay.
And we just went through all of the grammar rules, and we tried to make it as interesting as possible. You know, we used
Mm-hmm.
videos, and Grammar in Use is good because the examples are really related to life. They're not like
Yeah.
fake examples like I've seen a lot
Okay.
in grammar books.
Yeah.
And we did go back to the basics, but we practiced it through conversation and in an interesting way in the
Mm-hmm.
class, you know. And we kind of talked about how this grammar could be used when we speak, and what we're talking about when we're using this grammar, you know.
Yeah. Mm. Okay.
And that's
Mm.
also what I was talking about with the fluency before. I've seen a lot of people get to a really high level with vocabulary and grammar, but they struggle to speak. It's like every single word is forced out, you know? So there's no fluency
Yeah.
there. I see
Yeah.
that a lot. And so then I'm like, okay, well, we need to go back to the basics, but in this skill. So we're going to have to forget grammar right now and
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary, and we just need to focus on fluency.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hmm. So meaning that to do so, we only focus on one area instead of like more than one at the same time, so that we get it nailed down really quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you want to isolate a skill and practice that in itself. Yeah,
Mm,
definitely. It
okay.
helps. So
Mm,
you had some questions that I would really like to go over before when you sent me your questions.
yeah.
And we kind of talked about this. Your question was, what is the general experience of learning English, and how is that different from learning your first language?
Yeah.
So I would say that most people that I've met, they've learned English by going to a class. And that class was usually like in high school or in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And they were drilled grammar. And they never really practiced any skills other than, you know, it
Mm.
was like a classroom setting where the teacher explains the grammar and gives presentations, and
Yeah.
then students fill in the blank on their test.
Yes. Mm. That's right. That's
Yes.
really, really correct. I mean,
Yes.
we were basically doing that. You can get an A in English, you know, in high school, and then you will still feel like you're not doing anything at all.
Yeah.
Uh, and
And
then that
6 years later, you can't have a conversation with a native speaker. You know?
even the listening wasn't so like the listening skill wasn't so well trained back then
Yeah.
uh, in my class, even though we were a bunch of like top students, and then that didn't really go well, at least to me. But some of them might have been doing quite well, but then I wasn't one of them, sadly.
Yeah. Um, so, you know, a lot of people go through school like that, and it's really boring. Even if you are really good at it and somehow you enjoy grammar, um, many years later, you still can't speak. And I think that was really apparent when I once actually met an English teacher, a high school English
Hmm.
teacher, and I asked her about her hobbies, and she couldn't talk about her hobbies. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, so even the teacher wasn't able to have conversations. It was solely just learning grammar, you know, in your own language, not even learning grammar in English. You
Yeah.
know?
So at one point, I kind of realized that I wasn't making any progress in English. Then I started really seriously to look at it, to focus on it fully when I was 17. I think around that time, I just finished my high school certificate exams. It was called SPM. Yeah, high school certificate. Yeah. And then I joined a class again in American Language Center. So there are a lot of English language centers around you can join in Malaysia, and American is one of them. And then I think 6 months afterward, I started to think about, it somehow I felt it wasn't so enough. In a way, I thought there might be more about speaking in English instead of just listening passively to the English teacher talking about what they want, like what the textbook tells us to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go beyond that. And then now I'm talking to you. And to me, this is way much better than just talking to myself this whole time.
Yes. Talking to yourself is a good strategy. It is.
Yes.
It's weird to have to do it, but yeah, it can get old.
Okay. It never gets old to me. It's just that I don't get a professional feedback. Okay, don't not okay. I don't wanna say professional feedback, but even a normal feedback from a friend or from a native English, they can
Yeah.
just point that out for you, saying, "That's not the way how you say it." Although we don't learn all these, but it's usually said in this way, and then one example, another example, and another examples, and all that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Like if you have a pen pal that lives in America, for example, they're not really going to correct your grammar. And it's interesting because once you reach a certain level of grammar,
Yeah.
it's not so important anymore. And what I mean by that is, when I came back to the US, it was really
Yeah.
interesting. When I talk to native speakers here in the States,
Yeah.
native speakers make grammatical mistakes all the time. I mean,
Yes. Uh,
constantly.
Later on in life, I mean, just recently, probably from a year ago onward, I started to notice mistakes. And I was like, hold on a sec. You
Yeah.
just said this guy has, and then next this woman have. I was like,
Yeah.
did I listen it? Did I hear it wrong? And
Yeah,
then I
it's
went back
true.
again, and then I wasn't so sure about that. Then I also noticed in other podcasts, and a lot of them were making mistakes too, and they are basically talking like us, like I'm a native Chinese, um, and then I don't focus on grammars that much. I just talk whatever I want, I because I learned it that way, and then I just
Yeah.
it rolls off my tongue,
I mean,
and then I don't
like
care about.
native speakers will make usually different kinds of grammatical mistakes here in the
Okay.
US, but they make grammatical mistakes all the time, and they really, really, generally speaking, when I talk to native speakers here, they don't care. And as an English teacher, if I try to correct the grammar of a native speaker, they
Yeah.
actually get annoyed and frustrated, and
Yeah, yeah.
they don't care so much that they're just like, don't do that. Like
They can put on the label on the what grammar Nazi, grammar Nazi.
yes, yes, you can be a grammar Nazi, exactly. If they'll give you a bad label, or
It was a shock to me when I saw that. I was like, is that a thing, grammar Nazi?
yeah.
Although I understand a lot of words you guys were saying, it's just that we don't say it. We don't we don't think this is important in our culture. We don't even have the phrase for this. It's awkward.
Yes.
It's awkward to say. So it was a shock to me.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, once you get to a certain level, you don't have to worry about grammar so much, because native speakers, they're not listening, regardless of how most people feel when they're learning English.
Yeah.
Native speakers are not listening to your grammar mistakes. They
Okay.
don't care. And they're not going to correct you because they themselves don't want to be corrected.
I actually have. Uh, I think there's a guy I saw on internet. Uh, he's very famous. He's a psychologist. Basically, the way he speaks is really academic and really really serious. Um, uh, it might sound like he's rambling too much because his speech is so structured and so in a completely formal manner. He can add some informal elements into it, but it's just in overall it sounded very boring to a lot of people. But then some fans find it interesting because he can talk into so much details about something because the structure of the sentence is so precise and short, which means it's concise. Then I'm impressed by that, and
Yeah.
then I try to mimic that, and then I got this impression. I mean, some people that I just met were saying that you sound so academic. You sound so you sound so academic. I was like, what do you mean by that? And then they went on and say how I sound intelligent, and then I was like, how do you define intelligence in this sense? Like, in what way? I only said a couple of sentences, and then you just gave me that compliment. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, to say that you sound so intelligent, that's definitely a compliment. And it's interesting. It's actually most people learning English through English learning books, they learn academic English, but then they don't learn the everyday, like, English that native speakers use. Native speakers use idioms all the time, and
Yeah.
they talk in a certain way. Their pronunciation is not so clear. So when they go and speak to native speakers that don't have so much of an academic background or don't talk like that,
Yeah.
they can't understand.
Yeah, I was so fed up by that when I was watching a movie, like especially in Interstellar. Do you know the movie Interstellar?
No.
That Okay, you don't know. It's a 3 hour long movie about it's not scientific discovery. It's a sci-fi movie.
uh
Then it's sort of about the end of the earth, and then they're trying to find a way to no they're trying to find another planet to reside in, and then
oh, okay.
but that main character has an accent that really really confused me a lot, and then that changed my whole impression about English. Because
That is
there
one thing
were,
I'm going to do on this channel is I'm going to be interviewing different native speakers. Like there are tons of different accents here in the US,
yeah.
and
Hmm.
just try to make it during the interview I'll have subtitles and make it easier for people to understand native speakers. Another thing that I'm going to be doing is, and this is a big project of mine, I'm going to be working on a course, on developing a
Yeah,
course, and it's specifically for understanding the natural English that English speakers use, and it will be focused on the type of pronunciation that native speakers use and the words, especially idioms. Um,
yeah.
and as I'm developing that course, I'm going to be posting the course in my Facebook group. So
Oh,
it'll be totally free to the people in my Facebook group. So if you want to join, I'll just post
yeah,
a link underneath this video,
yeah.
and you can join that group and get the free lessons for the course that I'm going to be creating in the future.
Sure. I would like to be a part of that.
Awesome. Yes. And I would love to hear feedback as well if you feel like something could be done differently or explained differently. It's um the group is going to have a lot of different things in it that I'll be
Mhm.
posting. But yeah, the course material will be just completely free access to people who are in the group.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
in in what apps is that group going to be?
That's going to be in a Facebook group. So it's a Facebook group that I called Speaking English Today,
Oh,
and
okay.
I'll give you the link to it, and I'll also under this video I'll have the link if you want to open that up. And
Hmm.
yeah, you can join the group, and it will be just basically a community of people from intermediate to advanced English that are
Hmm.
trying to improve their English. And that's where I'll be posting a lot of stuff that I'm working on. So in that group, you get access to things that I don't post anywhere else.
Sure. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask you one more question. You have achieved a pretty high level of English. For others that haven't reached your level, what advice would you give them?
Wow. Personally, I don't think I'm in any position to tell that, like tell young people or any learners, like, hey, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. Mm, what I did was just talking to myself all the time. And at the same time, I also watch. I think probably what brought me here today was due to I've been it's due to that I've been spending a lot of time on the things that I really like. Yeah, I'm deeply interested in TED Talks and also scientific studies and also psychology in general. So I'm really into that, and I've been listening to their talk. The talk they are giving is quite comprehensive because they make it in a way it's more like it's more accessible to the public, and you can also watch it online. Yeah, on the YouTube. Apart from that, I also watch some funny videos. Yeah, like for example, I watched this YouTube video by Vanos Gaming. Uh, he's a quite successful YouTuber. I watched it for the last probably 5 to 6 years, and then I found it really interesting. I was basically doing the things I liked, and
That
I'm
is
still
very
doing
good
it.
advice.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Get into the things that you're interested in and get into the things that you like. That's awesome.
Yeah, that felt like forever, you know. So what I mean by that is when you are doing the things that you like, it feels like you can do it forever. You know, I can do this for the rest of my life. I don't care.
Well, all of the things that we mentioned in this video, I'll be posting links in the description below. So
Yeah,
feel free to access them. And I'll be sharing this video with you so you can see it later. And thank you so much, Kirk, for coming on to my show. I really appreciate that.
you're welcome.
And again,
Ah,
my name is Amanda Lynn. This is Speaking English Today. And again, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your experience with me.
yeah, thank you too for sharing your teacher's insight. Yeah,
My pleasure. All right.
okay.
And I would be happy to welcome you on another show if you'd like in the future. And just send me a message if you'd like to do that.
Sure, I will tell you that if I want to. Let's see if I got any other free time.
Sure. All right. So
Okay.
have a good day.
Yeah, have a nice day too.
Thank you again.
Okay.